Hey, what's going on, my friends? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Victor, and today I'm going to share with you 7 tips, 7 hacks, 7 ideas, 7 things that will help you deal with unconscious folks in your life in a much more effective way. This video is for empathic people, people who are on a spiritual path, a path of awakening, a path towards enlightenment, a path of just raising their consciousness. As you all know, as we do this, it creates more of a division between you and where you're kind of seeing the world from and a lot of people. And this can pose a lot of unique and legitimate challenges, especially when the unconscious people are people we know and have known a long time, family members, co-workers, close friends, not to mention the weirdos on the street you sometimes find yourself bumping up against, okay? It can be a really interesting predicament that the seeker, the empath, can feel very, very alone in. But the point of this video is to first and foremost say you're not alone, and I'm not talking about just me, just all the other viewers and all the other comments. There's a community out there of people who are in your shoes and know what it's like to kind of walk through life in the way you do. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had the blessing, because I put myself out there so much on YouTube, of just talking to so many people just like you. And from all my years of personal experience and all my years of speaking with people from all over the world, I've compiled 7 things that are going to help you tremendously deal with unconscious people in your life. Some of them are hacks, little shortcuts. Some of them are more like lessons, in a sense, that are, I think, going to be more maybe meaningful. But nonetheless, by the end of this video, you will have strategies. You'll have a way of going back into the world, and you'll have a lot of cool ways of dealing with this predicament that, again, you're not alone in. Number 1, this is more of a hack. It's don't always listen so well. It's hard for you. You're an empathic person. You have this bleeding heart, which I respect and think is beautiful. But I know for me in the past, I would open myself up and listen with all my presence, all my consciousness, completely expose myself, expose my heart and soul to anybody. Even people that did not have my best interest at heart, people that would drain me, people that were just sort of negative human beings. It was just a natural way of relating with people that I didn't know it was okay to shut down a little bit around certain especially challenging, extenuating circumstances, really challenging characters. Okay, it's not hard to do. Just straight up tune them out quite a bit. It reminds me of when I drive. And you probably drive as well. Is it really hard to drive? Do you need to give driving your full attention and focus? Of course not. In fact, I'm a Gemini. I tend to be kind of ADD, so I'm always listening to music, and I used to eat in my car and do all sorts of things, but it was easy. I wasn't crashing all the time. It's something that I can still do just fine. I have a good driving record, okay? So just apply that mindset. The next time some jibber-jabber energy vampire comes into your field demanding your attention, say, okay, you can listen to them with like 10% of your focus, and they're not gonna even know. And then you'll get to preserve your energy so that you can use it more wisely when your true friend comes up and needs a helping hand. Or maybe you just need some self-love, or you need some time, or your children. You know what I'm saying? So just having that discernment and knowing it's okay to do that for the greater good of you and everybody else, to just tune out the wackos a little bit. It's easy, they won't know it, and you'll feel a lot better. Number 2, and this is gonna be a hard one for some of you to hear, and yet it might be the thing that really changes your life. And something you probably already have known. It's get out of toxic relationships. A lot of times the severe challenge of dealing with unconscious people comes from our own willingness to be around them. And there are many reasons we do this, and a lot of it's a complex situation. I totally understand. I've had close friends that I've invested, years of my life just being with, where there is this like time investment, this depth, this bond that suddenly was no longer feeling like it was there, and what was there is the distance between who I was becoming and who they still were. But because of that guilt of leaving, I would constantly go back in and go back in and go back in and feel frustrated and say, oh my goodness, these unconscious people, it's not fair. Well, I was doing it to myself. I had this one situation that wasn't even a close friend. This can happen in more common situation as well. I had this client. I was a personal trainer and she was a client. I'm not going to say her name, but she was the type of person that she paid me she trained 3 times a week. It was good money. It was easy money. But this person would always find little ways of like belittling me, honestly, where I would kind of let my guard down. We'd be in a nice conversation. I'd say, okay, she's in a good mood today. And then she would strike and find something very undermining to say. And it used to cause me a great deal of frustration, a great deal of anger. I would be up at night thinking about it, like, oh my God, I can't believe she did that. I can't believe she said that. And I would be the bigger person. I wouldn't say anything. It was obvious to me she just had her own issues and her mom probably treated her poorly or something. But anyway, it was like I was dealing with this situation for years, and it was finally like, okay, I fired her. I made up some excuse where I couldn't train her anymore, and it was over, and I was free. But again, a big 80% of our problem with unconscious people tends to be, for a lot of us, one we put ourselves around. Number 3 is seek to understand, not necessarily to be understood. I know when you're an empath going through a spiritual awakening, which all my audience, the people that resonate with me are, there's such a desire to be understood, to talk, to relate, to connect. And it's just, for the most part, difficult to do with a large amount of the people in our life, especially the unconscious ones. We can't expect it to happen, okay? And that can cause a lot of, setting ourselves up for disappointment and frustration, etc. But what can help is to do the opposite, is to seek to understand them, not be understood by them. It comes straight from a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Amazing book by Dale Carnegie. It talks about this. And the whole premise is basically try to understand why they're so unconscious. And this can breed a lot of acceptance and alleviate a lot of your connection with their drama. I had this friend, I forgot his name for a second there. His name was Silas in high school. And not a lot of my friends liked hanging out with this kid. He was a thief. He was sort of obnoxious, and he rubbed people the wrong way. But me and my one buddy, we took a liking to him because we could see poor Silas came from this horrible household. His mom was a raging alcoholic. His father was not there, and he just grew up in an environment where you can't expect him to be a fully functioning member of society. I felt really bad for him. So when he would do certain things that would upset people, I would try to because I took the time to understand where he was coming from, it allowed me to accept him and I ended up liking him. We became decent friends in spite of the whole situation. But if I was to have, and I've done this before many times, but if I was to have just judged him by his unconsciousness and said, well, he's just a bad, negative person, I might not have got to see the other side of him. And at the very least, in seeking to understand, it allowed me to not be upset with him or resentful. It was more like, yeah, I understand why he does the things he does. And my emotional response, instead of frustration and resentment, tends to be more of like compassion and understanding. And that was actually very helpful to him, I could tell. Number 4 is to kind of, again, going back to acceptance, accept the situation at hand. Look around, turn on the news. You probably don't watch the news, either do I. But if you were to, there's so much negativity in the world, and we are a product of so much darkness, so many wars and human suffering. And here we are, not that far into the future. As Joe Rogan says, you look back a few hundred years, that's 3 people ago. That's not very much at all. And look at where the world was 200-300 years ago. It was so much unconsciousness, so much suffering, so much just insanity. And we're not that distant from that. We're a product from all of that. So the fact that you and me are having this conversation is a freaking miracle. But that's the situation. Not everyone is waking up and on such an accelerated path of raising their consciousness and coming back home to who they are as a spirit. Not many people are doing that. So the reality is that there's a world that where a huge amount of it just very unconscious, and it's just a situation as it stands. So what I try to do is cherish the people in my life who are good relationships. Fortunately, the more you're on this path, you'll start attracting a lot of really good relationships. The unconscious ones will tend to fade out. But prior to that, I took the advice of my old friend. His name was Guy. He was actually an amazing human being. He said his mother told him, he'd always talk about his mom. He was so sweet. He said, my mother told me that if you have a handful of really close friends, then you are the most blessed person on the planet. Something like that, I paraphrased. But what he meant is like having one true friend is priceless, okay? You might have 99% of the people you work with, unconscious, negative people you just sort of apply the hacks against to kind of bide your time till you can go home. But if you have one or two really amazing relationships, that's fantastic. Value them and just cherish them, because again, the way the world is that's in a sense lucky of us. Number 5, just a word of the wise, is you can learn a lot from unconscious people. It's not, I used to go through life thinking like, stopping with my judgment and assessment of the people. Like, well, that's just if someone, for example, says something really negative to me or something, I could justify that they're a mean person, want nothing to do with them, how dare they, I'm gonna go on my merry way. Instead of saying, you know what? Even though that was mean, even though they might be sort of a negative person, maybe there is some truth to what they said, especially if I felt an emotional resistance to what they said. I'll give kind of a funny example. I'm on YouTube. I get a lot of people sort of lashing out at me. I've gotten used to it, but in the past I wasn't so much. And this one woman one time sent me this series of Facebook messages tearing down my current hairstyle at the time. This woman was a hairdresser, and she showed me all these diagrams and all this sort of like proof as to why my hairstyle at the time was a stupid choice. And it was like this, I could tell the anger and the energy that went into this like thesis of why my hairstyle isn't the wisest choice. And there was so much like cruelty in this person like directed at me. But at that time it was like, I'd gotten used to it. So I was like, okay, honey, my wife's a hairdresser. I'm like, honey, is this woman said all this about me? What's all that about? She's like, well, yeah, technically she was accurate apparently. So anyway, I modified my hairstyle to be more in alignment with my face shape. And that's sort of a funny example, obviously. Sometimes it's not that easy, but this is just an example of a really cruel, just someone who I upset, I got under her skin or something, and she just sent me all this negativity. But as I combed through that, no pun intended, there was some truth to it. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll adjust my hairstyle. So my point is, anytime I feel myself worked up by someone, even if they're mean, I can almost always learn something valuable from them. And then that makes the whole encounter, even though energetically unpleasant, valuable in the end. Number 6, and a lot of us know this, but we sometimes don't apply it. So maybe this can remind you, is don't fall into their games. My friend Aaron Dowdy, he had this situation where his neighbor, for whatever reason, was like rubbed the wrong way by Aaron, even though Aaron was like never like out in his yard or anything. He kind of just did his own thing. And apparently, Aaron was renting his house. Apparently the owners of the house had this tree that eventually got bigger, and it was a pine tree, I believe. And it got to a point where a teeny little bit of the tree was hanging over technically the border of the 2 yards. And once a year, Aaron's tree would drop like 8 pine needles into this person's yard. And this neighbor was so always worked up about it. He like wrote Aaron a note, this nasty note, and like Aaron had to go over there and talk to him, and it was all this like crazy drama of clearly just an unconscious person with like nothing better to do but seek out drama throughout the neighborhood. And at one point this guy gathered up all like 9 or 10 pine needles that had fallen into his yard and gathered it up with his anger and he scooped it up in his hands and he put it on Aaron's porch and rang the doorbell and left. Stuff like that. So sometimes it's like, what do I do with this situation? What Aaron knew to do, which was very smart, he just knew to not give that guy any attention at all. He knew not to play into the game, even though the sight of the pine needles might have initially provoked some anger, like what is with this freaking wacko kind of thing. But Aaron knew just to ignore the guy, just don't play into it, just straight up ignore him. And therefore, Aaron was unaffected by this guy. Even though he was living in close proximity, that was the smartest thing to do. And we could sometimes, I know there's been times in my life where I should have done that, but hadn't, and then got myself mixed up into this energy of conflict that I could have probably seen coming a mile away, but felt tempted. Okay, so that's definitely a good word to the wise, is just don't put fuel on the fire. Lastly, and this is gonna be like the main reason for me sharing this whole entire video. Some of the things were useful though, comical. This is my real message for the video if you're still here, okay? And this is what I believe we've come to do, okay? It's like if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. I look around at the world and I'm not at all pleased with how human beings conduct themselves. And just the human nature has gotten so out of hand and so unconscious that it's very sad to look at, quite frankly. But I'm not gonna sit here and complain. I'm going to conduct myself as best I can in a way that I would like to eventually hopefully see mirrored in the world. And that is this. This is the strategy, this is the hack of the day, the technique that will work more than anything else. It's show, especially the unconscious people, love. My one friend Marv, he was like a really religious guy. He'd always say, Vic, it's easy to show love to your best friend, or your brother, or your mother, or your grandmother. It's very hard, but more important to show love to the main people. Okay, and that's what I'm saying here. And I'm not only saying that as like a suggestion to be as saint-like as you can, I'm saying it also because in my experience, it actually works. And again, I'm in the situation where I've dealt with a lot of unconscious people, probably more so than the average person being on YouTube. Every day I get mail, people make videos about me, picking me apart and throwing them up on YouTube. I got a lot of it, okay? And what I've learned is this. You can not only free and liberate yourself from the entanglement of negative energy with other people, but you can really deliver a lot of value and really help these unconscious people big time by showing them a little bit of love and decency and compassion and understanding and tolerance and leniency. Okay, and I would literally watch this in action with my YouTube comments. Quite a bit, I'll get a really mean comment. Someone who's just blatantly being mean, and Victor, you suck, and here's why, you're ugly, I hate you, you don't know what you're talking about, this kind of thing. And what I would do, and I still do sometimes to this day, is when I would see that comment, I would choose to not respond, because my initial reaction, of course, is to lapse into that energy and tell them what I think. But I'll choose to walk away and clear my energy, whatever I gotta do, just a little bit of distance, usually all that's necessary. And then sometimes, when I feel inspired to, I will come back. And in spite of the pure expression of hatred and negativity, in spite of that, in spite of the fact that I could easily justify just deleting the comment, in spite of that, I will go back and I will write something friendly, genuine, and loving and nice. Usually it'll be something along the lines of like, listen, I respect your opinion. I'm really sorry that you're feeling this so intensely about me, but I want to let you know that I appreciate your feedback, and if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Something decent like that. And most of the time what happens is, and I'll kind of keep an eye on these comments in particular for this reason, is that they will come back and say, oh my goodness, Victor, I feel so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I wasn't really mad at you. There was a lot of things going on in my life, and I just really, really want you to know I'm sorry. And I like you anyway, or something like that. Most people, when you show them love, even with their force and their negativity, it will diffuse that. It'll make you feel amazing. it'll do a lot of good to another person. That might change that person's life. People who are that unconscious, that just lash out on random strangers, basically, they might not have had a lot of encounters with someone who's genuinely compassionate and understanding and loving towards them. And it could just be that one person that makes a difference in the world. That could be you. It reminds me of this, I just watched this awesome documentary with George St. Pierre, one of the best mixed martial artists in the world, toughest guys in the world, tough as nails, and he was bullied intensely all growing up. And he was this young kid, there's all these older kids around just beating the crap out of him every day. And he lived in a ton of fear. But when eventually his dad signed him up to his dad was an alcoholic, he didn't really get a lot of love from his dad. Eventually he was signed up to his martial arts class. And this instructor he had, this karate instructor, would once in a while say, "Good job, George. That was a nice one, George." That little bit of just somewhat positive reinforcement was enough to take George out of poverty, out of getting his ass kicked every day, and he became a world champion, a true martial artist, a true model. Okay, and interesting enough, he eventually ran into one of his bullies on the street, and that person was homeless. And George helped him. He gave him money, he gave him advice, and it's a beautiful example of, again, you want something done right, you want to see it change the world, but it starts with you and it starts with me. And we can do that by showing other people love. It's not easy. It does take some emotional strength and stamina and sometimes some separation, but we can always come to our senses and come back into our heart and then deliver love. And it works very well. Okay, my friends, that's all I have to say about this video. I hope it helps you and serves you in some way. I wish you all nothing but the best, and I will see you in the next video. Have an amazing day. Namaste.